Today we're going to begin the process of making this beauty. This is a hot chocolate cake. This one I made, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago for my friend Sarah's birthday. I even made the marshmallows that are on the top. I'm not going to be that aggressive this time, but we are going to do the rest of it. And it's going to take us 2 days. Not that it has to, but I'll explain that as I go. Ready?
Microwave safe plate, and I'm gonna spray this with some cooking spray, sugar, flour, eggs, butter, and almond extract.
Okay, we're gonna whip up the cake part of this real quick, all right? It does start with a cake mix, a chocolate cake mix of your choosing. So I'm gonna dump the cake mix to the stand mixer. Oh my God, let me stop the dishwasher, hold on. It's so loud. Okay, then we're going to need a ½ cup of hot chocolate. I have this fancy stuff that I got at like Home Goods or something. Any kind of hot chocolate. I've also made it with Swiss Miss or whatever. So, a ½ cup. Now, I also, I should have sifted this. I've learned that lesson. I'm going to sift this. Maybe I got the mistake out of the way up front. I'm going to sift the chocolate cake mix. Okay. Really, sometimes, depending on what I'm making, can make a difference. Sifting is the worst. Okay. So I've taken my chocolate cake mix, any type chocolate cake mix, and I've sifted it, which is annoying, but necessary, I believe, in this particular recipe, into my stand mixer bowl. And I've also pre-sifted the hot chocolate, any flavor, any type of hot chocolate. And I'm going to take a ½ cup of the hot chocolate and mix it into my cake mix. Okay. Next, we are going to take 3/4 of a cup. This is a 1/4 of sour cream. That's going to go into our, I've never known if sour cream, these measuring cups are meant to measure dry ingredients. And these type of measuring cups are meant to measure wet ingredients, liquid ingredients. I've never known, which one sour cream belongs to, I don't have this small. Okay, so that's 1/4. Oh. Okay, I did 3/4 of a cup of sour cream into my cake mix. Next, we're going to add a ½ cup of oil. I'm going to move this out of the way before I dump something into it. And now 3 eggs. Okay, so I've added 3 eggs. I'm going to add 1 cup of milk. I knew I was going to be making this, so I purposely got whole milk. And, but if you don't have whole milk, and you have the rest of the, don't hold up the process. Use whatever milk you have. Excuse me. So, and then lastly, vanilla. 2 teaspoons of vanilla. This is a chocolate cake, not a vanilla cake. You're not going to taste the vanilla, so I'm using fake vanilla. Bakers across the world are spitting at me right now. It's just too expensive, that stuff. Okay. I'm going to get this into my stand mixer. I should probably look at the counter before I hit record. I'm going to let this go for a few minutes and I'll be right back. Okay. So I scraped on the bowl a couple of times and the cake mix is ready. So now, let me make this so you can see it. So now, we're gonna get them in the oven. This recipe is for an 8-inch cake, so I'm using 8-inch round pans. These things here are called something, I'm sure they have a name. But what they are is they wrap around the outside of your pan. You drench them in cold water, wring it out, put it around the pan, and it's meant to draw heat out so that your cakes are flat. Science. And that's why I'm using them. Obviously, these are not critical. I lived my whole entire life without them and still made really nice cakes. So the other fancy thing I now sometimes have are these pre-cut parchment paper things. Again, I'm just kind of, if I'm going to all this effort, I'm just sort of ensuring that my cake's going to turn out the way I want it to. So I'm using my, you know what, and I'm going to spray a little first, put my parchment down, and now I'm going to spray the heck out of it. Okay, I've adequately sprayed my 2 pans. Ultimately, what I'm going to do is that after these come out of the oven and they've well cooled off and even partially frozen, I'm going to slice them each in half so that I have a 4-layer cake. Again, not necessary, but it will make a taller cake because there'll be icing in between each layer and it just looks pretty. So that's my intent. So I'm going to go ahead and a lot of times also I will weigh these. I'm not going to do that just to make sure that they're even. I'm going to guess. Okay. So I have poured this in here. The next thing I'm going to do before I stick these into the 350-degree oven is I'm going to bang them down. You can't see it and I don't want to tilt it, but basically this kind of releases the air bubbles. More science that I find irritating. Again, love science, like as a concept. I'm a big, I'm a believer, but I don't get it. So it's frustrating because baking is science and I find that frustrating. Okay. So if you've ever seen people do that on the food shows, that's what they're doing, releasing all the bubbles. Okay, I'm going to put this in the oven. I'm going to bake it for, I don't know how long, because I usually, a cake like this, I'll set my timer for like probably 18 minutes and then check it because I don't want to overcook it. So I tend to, you know this about me, I tend to check it, add 3 minutes, check it, add 2 minutes because I'm obsessive that way. So I will let you know when they come out. So you can see behind me, the cakes look pretty good. They came out. They're cooling. I'm not gonna, while they're still warm, I'm gonna wrap them in saran wrap and then tin foil, and I'm gonna put them in the freezer. I'm gonna let them get cold. Hopefully my timing is good. Still they're like frozen, but I can still cut them. And then I'm hoping to get this on video, but I will slice them this way and then wrap them each of the 4 pieces individually and stick them back in the freezer. So that's what's going to happen with those cakes. If you wrap them in saran foil while they're still a little bit warm, it'll hold in some of the moisture and you'll have like a moisture cake. Right now what we're going to do is we're going to make a buttercream icing that's going to go in the middle of the layers. We're going to ice the outside with a hot chocolate whipped cream, but this makes it a little bit more decadent to do the buttercream on the inside. That's not the original recipe, but that's what I'm doing. So there are 2 sticks of butter that I've softened in here, and so I'm going to whip this up. Then a general rule for American buttercream icing is for every 1 stick of butter, you want to use about 2 to 3 cups of powdered sugar, depending on, in general, just depending on taste. Like, you know, if you would like a sweeter icing, sometimes also I'll put it in there and I'll think, oh, I need, you know, I'll have 2 sticks of butter and 4 cups of sugar, and then I'll think, oh, I need to get more out of it, so I'll add another cup, you know, so there's more volume of icing. But I think I'll do the 2 sticks, and I'll do 5 cups of powdered sugar. So I'll do that right now. 5 cups of powdered sugar, and then, because of the kind of cake we're making, I have the hot chocolate, the pre-sifted hot chocolate. I'm going to put a half a cup of that in as well. So, so yeah, I'm going to dump in 5 cups of confectioner's sugar. So I have the butter and the sugar just going at the lowest speed possible, so it doesn't, all the powdered sugar doesn't come everywhere. I'm going to add a half a cup of the hot chocolate mix to flavor it. I'm going to turn that off. Okay, and then we're going to start to add our liquid. I have the whole milk, so I'm going to use that. If you have cream, or you could use whatever milk that you have. So I think one of the biggest mistakes, certainly one of the biggest mistakes I made for many, many years was making my frosting too thin. So err on the side of thick. You can always add more. Of course, if you add too much liquid, you can add more sugar to make it thick again. But again, you just got to be careful, because eventually your frosting will be too sweet if you have to keep adding sugar to it. So it's easier to try and control the liquid rather than the sugar. So I'm going to say, I'm going to start with 4 tablespoons. No, I'm going to put 3 in and get it all mixed together, and then I'll see. It will probably need more than that. So I have mixed that up, scraped down the sides. I definitely need some more liquid, so I'm gonna turn this on low. I'm gonna add another tablespoon right away and let this mix again. So I did the same thing again. I mixed it up, I scraped down the sides just now. I am gonna add a little bit of vanilla. Of course, if you weren't adding the hot chocolate to it and you were just making a vanilla icing, you would add vanilla extract. I am still going to add it anyway, the fake stuff. So don't forget that that's a liquid as well. So don't discount that. And I still need some more liquid after this, but let's mix this in first. Okay, so since I'm not using this immediately, this frosting, I still think it might be a little too thick. I would add another splash or so of milk, but since I'm not using it right away, I'm going to be storing it in the refrigerator. And then when I use it, I need to take it out and let it get back down to room temperature. Then I may be able to, I might need to add more milk at that point. So I'm not going to do that now. So the next steps, as I said, I'm going to get those into the freezer. Hopefully then when they're semi-frozen, take them out, slice them so that I have 4 layers, and then wrap them again, freeze them. When they're completely frozen, then I am going to do what's called a crumb coat and put the layers together with the buttercream in between each layer, and then stick it back in the freezer overnight and finish the cake off tomorrow. Having said that, I'm going out to dinner because I do have a life outside of baking. No, I don't, but sometimes I do. Sometimes I leave the house. So I really don't know that I have much of a choice but to finish it when I get back, since it's a cake for tomorrow. So yeah. I mean, you don't care. For you, it's all one video. I guess it doesn't really matter when I do it. You don't really need to know my scheduling. But now you do. Okay. I'll see you in a bit. We've had a cake disaster of epic proportions. When I was removing the cooled cakes and trying to put them onto a plate to put into the freezer, this layer right here broke in half, like in half. 100% my fault. I was rushing. The cake was still too warm to move. It fell apart. So my plan to make a 4-layer cake is gone because I can't now do the horizontal slice. So that's a bummer. But I am going to still try and salvage this and make it into a 2-layer cake. Won't really matter too much as long as it stays together long enough for me to, you know, get it iced and everything. If you're watching this, that means it worked. Otherwise, it's on the blooper reel. So, last night, I put them in the freezer. I had made the hot chocolate buttercream. I put that in the fridge, and then this morning took it out and let it get to room temperature. So now we're going to put the middle layer of icing on it, and then put it back in the freezer, and then we'll go on to the next step. So I have already put a cake board under here. That's just to keep it steady. I wouldn't have normally necessarily done that for this cake, except for that because it was broken, I wanted as much sturdiness as I could muster. So, let me stick this thing on. This is on my little turntable here. Makes me feel like a professional. So the first thing I'm going to do is just dab a little bit of icing onto the turntable just to kind of keep this from sliding around. And then here we go. I'm going to dump some icing. I have a lot now because I thought I'd be doing, 4 layers, and this icing would have gone in between all of the layers. Not the case anymore. So if you'll recall, the outside layer of icing is going to be hot chocolate whipped cream. So we only need this icing for the middle, and I'm going to make a nice thick layer of it, again, since it's only a 2-layer cake. So this is sometimes, or not sometimes, all the time, called a crumb coat. So even if I were using buttercream for the whole thing, a crumb coat is what you do to, as you spread the cake on, as I'm sure you've experienced if you've ever made a cake, especially a chocolate cake, it crumbs and then it gets in the icing and then it doesn't look pretty. So the idea here is that along the outside of the cake, we're going to put a very thin layer of buttercream around that sort of seals in the crumbs. That way when we put the final layer on, no crumbs get in it. Does that make sense how I just explained it? Maybe not. So I'm going to get enough icing on here that it'll spill over the sides. You'll see what I mean here. And I have a lot of it. And then I'm going to put the second layer on. Oh, it's still sliding everywhere. Okay. So now, I'll take my second layer. I am going to flip it so that the sort of domed part, if there is a domed part, because most of the time cakes will have a bit of a dome, I used those cake fabric things around the outside. So it did its job pretty well. I have a pretty flat cake, so I'm not really going to bother with slicing, evening it out any further for this particular cake, but I am going to make it so that the domed part is facing down so that the top of the cake is really flat. Let's hope. There we go. So I'll just kind of line this up. Okay, so I think this obviously is going to work. I'm going to keep it in the fridge until just before we need to eat it, because of course as it gets to room temperature it might start to fall off a bit. Hopefully not. So now I'm just going to do a really thin layer of this all the way around the cake. I have a big spatula here. was going to tell you the name of this spatula, but now I can't remember. Offset. It's called an offset spatula. It is so much easier to frost a frozen cake than it is a room temperature cake. So keep that in mind. Good morning, Colin. Okay. So now we'll start to drip this over the sides here. This can be messy. That's the whole point of a crumb coat. It doesn't have to be pretty because you'll be putting the pretty coat on top, and it is crumbing. I don't know if you can see that yet, but I'm getting crumbs into the frosting, which again, don't care because this is not the icing that will be showing. So I'm going to be real sort of clumsy and quick with this crumb coat. And we're not even putting the same frosting on it. We're going to be putting the whipped cream, which is nice and fluffy, so that'll go on really, really easily. When you have little gaps, because there was the dome, right, and I put it dome side down, because of the dome, you're going to have little gaps here. Just shove some icing in there to block it up, especially if you need this to be even because of the next icing layer you're going to put on. Again, we don't really need it to be that even because whipped cream is fluffy and forgiving. Okay, so I'm just gonna, oopsie. Again, if I were trying to make this pretty, I would be being a lot more careful. Okay? We've salvaged the cake-ish. Okay? What I'm going to do is put this on a plate, just lay a little bit of saran wrap over it, put it in the freezer until I'm ready to do the hot chocolate whipped cream, and I'll be back. Okay. Next step is the hot chocolate whipped cream. So we crumb coated our broken chocolate cake, which, oh no, nobody. Okay, key to making fresh whipped cream using whipped cream, having whipping cream, is to put a clean bowl and a clean beater, or if you're using hand mixer, your beaters, in the refrigerator and get them nice and cold prior to whipping up the whipped cream. So I normally don't measure. I normally just kind of dump it in, but I know that's not everybody's gig. So I'm going to use, I think maybe, which will be way too much, I'm sure of it, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to make I'm going to use about 3 cups of heavy whipping cream. Okay, so 3 cups of heavy, 3 cups of heavy whipping cream is going into my mixer. Okay, and so to this, I'm going to add, I think at this stage, before I even really start to whip it, I'm going to add some of the hot chocolate mix. And I want to add it early because the hot chocolate mix is kind of gritty. This is my only complaint about this recipe. And so I wanted to spend as much time in the liquid as possible for it to dissolve. And whipping the cream in a cold bowl does not take long at all. So it doesn't give it a lot of time to kind of incorporate and dissolve in the liquid. So I think I'm going to take, I'm going to take like, let's say a half a cup of the hot chocolate mix and put that in to my heavy cream. And then we're also going to sweeten it with some confectioner's sugar. I'm going to say I'm going to put in let's say 3 tablespoons-ish. No, I tell you what, I'm going to start with 2 because we can always add more later. We don't want to get it too sweet. So I'm going to let this go and I'll show you sort of what to look for as it starts to mix. So it's just been mixing for a couple of minutes. I just want to kind of show you so you can know when to stop. So this is still pretty thin. You can see it's sort of not holding its shape very well. So I'm going to keep it going for another minute or so. But like I said, there is a it goes pretty quickly, and it'll go from this stage to done in 30 to 60 seconds, I'm guessing. So you want to keep a close eye on it, or you'll have hot chocolate butter, which might not be so bad. I also want to mention, I just did it maybe another 20 seconds and checked it again. It still needs, it's better for sure. You can see that, but it still needs a little bit more time. But this is the stage where I want to taste it, because I don't want to wait till it's at the consistency I want and then taste it and realize it needs more sugar, and then I have to beat some more, and then it'll get over whipped. So this is called a tasting spoon. I'm just gonna see. I am gonna add another tablespoon, a big nice tablespoon of powdered sugar, because I think it needed just a little bit more. Oops. So yeah, you see why I did that. So I'm gonna let this go. Honestly, it's gonna be about 30 seconds, I think, away from being done. Okay, so that wasn't even 30 seconds. It was more like 15, I'd say. So it's fast. It's a fast process. At this point, you could choose to just screw the cake and get a spoon and go for it, because this stuff is really delicious. So I'm just gonna get it nice and even here, and then I'm going to frost the cake with it. Using my offset spatula, just kind of getting it around here. This is not my my strong suit, the decorating part. So it's taken a lot of practice, and I've watched a lot of YouTube videos, and I still am not real good at getting things smooth and even. It's a real talent, the people who decorate cakes so well. The turntable helps a lot. Certainly not necessary, but it definitely helps. So now I'm just going to kind of get toward the bottom, add more to the sides here. Doesn't matter if I make a mess, which I obviously clearly just did, but no big deal, because we're going to be taking this off and putting it onto a pretty plate for display. So it doesn't really matter that you make a mess of things. Another bonus, always decorate or ice your cake on a different plate that you plan on serving it on. You do have to think about, however, the transfer, right? Getting it from where you're decorating it to the plate. There's a thing called a cake lifter, which is like a spatula that you can slide under a cake. Okay. Add a little bit more on the top here. I'm also going to do some additional decorating at the end. Of course, all of that is optional, depending on how fancy you want to get. But there are a lot of really kind of basic things you could do if you wanted to sort of make an impressive dessert, but you don't have the decorating tools or the time. So for example, even if you just got a thing of chocolate syrup and just kind of drizzled it, you could crush up candy canes or peppermints and put those on the top, different types of sprinkles. You can purchase, you know, on the cake aisle, a, you know, different decorations that are already like fondant flowers, things like that. You could use real flowers, as long as you remember to take them off before you serve the cake. So yeah, there's a lot of different things you could do to decorate the cake that don't take a lot of time or any special tools. I am running out of time myself before I have to leave with this cake, and I want it to spend some time in the fridge or freezer first. So I'm not sure that I'm gonna have time to put the chocolate ganache on the top, which is really unfortunate. But because you're pouring warm chocolate over this cake, I want to make sure the cake is nice and cold, and I'm not entirely sure I'm gonna have that kind of time. And then also to be able to then get it back into the freezer once the chocolate ganache gets on there. So I might have to get a little creative here, so I'm gonna think about that for a few minutes. I'm gonna stick this back in the freezer, and then I'll come back and figure out what the heck I'm gonna do. Okay, so unfortunately, I have to leave in like less than an hour. So I don't have time to do the chocolate ganache, which is disappointing, but that's life. So now we're gonna do the scariest part, which is moving the cake onto the thing. This is my retro cake plate that's actually retro from my great aunt, and I love it. It's so cool. So I'm gonna move the cake. I have a you know, a cardboard thing under here. I'm gonna slide my big huge cake spatula thing so far so good. I'm gonna use this, I think, to slide it off, and then of course I'll need to kind of fix it. Ta-da! Did it! So just gonna fix it up a little. Now of course it does matter if I make a mess. Got a couple fingerprints in here. All right, so what I've decided to do to decorate, since I don't, oh, let me take this back. Put this up here. Okay, so what I decided to do to decorate is that I took the remaining whipped cream and put it into my piping bag here. And I'm just going to go along the outside. This is a star tip. And do some little stars all the way around the bottom to just kind of give it an edge. The whipped cream doesn't pipe as well, of course, as a stronger like buttercream would, but we'll live. Okay, so I piped that all around the bottom. Now I'm gonna do some big ones around the outside edge, and I'm gonna do rosettes here. So that means I start in the middle and I'm gonna swoop it around like this. Okay, and I'm gonna do that. I have plenty to do them all the way around, so I think that's what I'll do. See how far I can get. Okay, so I've piped rosettes. I'm not doing that. Looks nice. Okay, and then I am going to take a little bit of the hot chocolate and a little siftery thing. I think I'm going to just do a little bit of cocoa would work here too. Just kind of sprinkle this over the cake. And now it's pretty brown. So I think I have some shimmer Diamond Shimmer Sprinkles, they're called. And I'm just gonna kind of dump these into the rosettes a little bit. Okay, so again, I will take a picture of it, the top of it. But this is where I'm at. So now we just cross our fingers that it makes it in the car to the location. By far, I keep saying this is the most complicated part, this is the most complicated part. The most complicated part is getting it to your location, traveling with it. Oftentimes I hold it in my lap so I can make sure it stays steady. This time I'm the only one in the car, so we'll see what happens. Oh, I usually take a picture of it before I leave, just in case it's all jacked up by the time I get where I'm going. That way, whoever I can be like, see, this is what it looked like. It was pretty. Oh boy. That's not gonna work. So I gotta come up with some other solution, but there you go. A hot chocolate icebox cake. Let me know if you have any questions. Happy holidays.